I've put together a little fermentation chamber that heats up and cools down so I can maintain pretty much any temperature that I want. Now I'm primarily going to use that to record fermentation times to share with you. You can check the link in the description for more about that. But this period is also going to give me the chance to experiment and to learn a little bit more about bulk fermentation, because right now it is a bit of a mystery to me. So today I'm going to bake two loaves. One's going to be fermented to 50% of its original volume and the other one to 100%. They'll both go straight into the fridge after shaping, and then they're going to get baked off the next day. First up, I'm going to mix up a double batch of dough, 1,600 grams in total. I'm going to use 100 grams of that for a test piece of dough, and then later I'll split the remainder dough into two 750 gram pieces. So to my bowl, I'm adding 513 grams of water, followed by 195 grams of active starter at 100% hydration. And after a quick stir, I'm going to add 775 grams of strong white bread flour and 18 grams of salt. I'll use a spoon to bring everything together and then use my hand to create a rough dough, just making sure that there aren't any dry pockets of flour. Now this is going to sit in my fermentation fridge covered at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. I'm going to release a full breakdown video of this fridge in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned. Now after its little rest, I'm going to knead this dough. I'm going to make sure that the starter's well dispersed and it's a little smoother. Now while I'm learning all about this fermentation process, I'm going to try and train my senses at the same time to better understand what's going on with the dough, and then hopefully by the end of it I'm not going to need to rely on using a control piece of dough or bowls with markers to judge the different stages of the bulk fermentation. And right now I'm going to remove 100 grams of that dough. I'm going to pop it into a jar to monitor. Now I'm using quite a big piece, so there's a considerable gap between the marks on the jar. It just makes the rise easier to judge. And this control dough and the main dough are going to sit in my chamber at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we're already 2 hours in on the process. I've already given this piece of dough 2 sets of stretching and folding, and you're joining me for the divide and shape before the final part of the bulk fermentation. And interestingly, in the last couple of hours the control piece has barely even expanded. Now I'm going to divide this dough equally into 2 dough balls, 750 grams each. I'm going to place them into 2 separate bowls. I'm going to make sure they're well shaped so that it's easy to see the rise in the bowl. That's going to help me remember what they look like for future baking sessions. Now, as soon as that control piece of dough hits that first line, it's going to be at 50%, so I'll shape the first piece of dough. And then when the control hits the second line, it'll be at 100% and I'll shape the second piece of dough. Now you can see why I used a larger test piece of dough, because the marks are quite far apart on that jar, so it's easy for me to judge how much the dough's expanded. And since kneading this dough, it's taken just under 4 hours to increase by 50%. That's at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. The dough doesn't smell raw anymore. It smells like a young fermentation, almost a little bit sweet. It feels like it's expanded, but it's still quite rigid and it doesn't jiggle in the bowl. You know, using moments like this to concentrate on the dough, looking, smelling, touching and memorising is going to help me in the future. It's well worth me taking the time to do. The dough's been rolled up without degassing it, and after a quick bath in rice flour, this is going to get covered. It's going to go directly into my fridge until I bake tomorrow. Right, the second dough, and this one took pretty much 6 hours to double in size. And the first thing I notice about this dough is how hollow the bowl sounds when it's tapped. The dough jiggles easily in the bowl, almost like jelly. And the fermentation smells more mature, but not overly so. I guess less sweet and a little bit more sour. We've also got some bubbles forming on the surface. This is super gassy, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens when this one is baked up. Now, I don't want to degas this dough while I'm shaping it. I need to be careful, but I also need to make sure that it comes together firmly and we get a nice firm shape. So this gets the same treatment as the other dough, a quick bath in rice flour before resting in the basket seam side up. And after covering, this will go straight in the fridge until baking tomorrow. Now both of these loaves will get the same treatment. They're both going to get baked on a baking stone that's been preheated in the oven to 220 degrees Celsius or 430 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes covered and then 25 minutes uncovered. Before we jump onto the loaves, I'd like to say a big thank you to Risdon and Risdon. I've been searching for a decent apron for a long time, and recently I stumbled on their website and they kindly sent me out their original apron in trade brown with cork straps and trim, which is pretty cool. Now if you're in the market for a beautifully crafted apron, and I mean beautifully crafted, you should check out their lineup. I'm going to leave a link to their website in the video description along with a discount code, and my apron will be listed in my baking toolkit on the website too. Now, judging by their outside appearance, I'd be happy with both of these loaves. The loaf that was bulk fermented to 50% sits up proudly. It's got a nice open ear. It's a full round loaf. The loaf that doubled during bulk fermentation's bigger, no doubt about that. It's kind of grown outwards on all sides as opposed to exploding upwards. So we'll have a quick look and see what's going on with the crumb. Now I've got big channels running through the 50% loaf. You can see where it's exploded in one big burst, and the crumb structure is kind of completely random with big craters. But the loaf I bulk fermented to 100% has got a much more even crumb, miles better. Won't be losing any marmite or jam through those holes when it's toasted. But I will say that both loaves taste very good, and I can't detect any taste or texture difference when eating them. The shorter fermented dough isn't gummy at all, which surprises me. But this isn't over, because I'm interested to see what will happen when I extend the fermentation period more by proving in the basket at 25 degrees Celsius before retarding in the fridge. That's going to make a big difference to both of these doughs, and that is what I'm going to be looking at in next week's video. Now here's a question for you. Do you really need to feed your sourdough starter before you bake? Well, you can find out in this video right here. And next week we'll be looking to see what happens when we play around with the proving in the basket, that final prove. But for now, a huge thank you for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Stay tuned.